I'm sorry. I kind of feel like New York, you get what you get.
Yeah.
That's the best you could put forward. Mamdani didn't beat anyone.
Yeah.
He didn't, I mean, the Republican guy was still wearing a red beret.
Yeah.
I mean, for how long is Prince?
I will not abandon my principles for fear of being deemed radical. As the great senator from Vermont once said, what's radical is a system which gives so much to so few and denies so many people the basic necessities.
He walked in prepared to deliver another polished, forward-thinking speech. But he walked out looking like someone who had just been handed the worst joke of his life. Not by a competing politician, not by an aggressive journalist, but by two men who treat primetime television like a full-contact sport. When Zohran Mamdani stepped onto that stage to face Tyrus and Gutfeld, he came expecting resistance. He came expecting disagreement. What he received instead was a front-row education in live television mayhem.
This might be too elitist, but if you belong at a co-op meeting or a condo meeting...
We have won because New Yorkers have stood up for a city they can afford. A city where they can do more than just struggle. And it's where the mayor will use...
Before we continue, tap that like button and subscribe because you genuinely do not want to miss what comes next. Now, here's what you need to understand about Mamdani. In certain circles, he's considered the next big thing. Young, sharp, openly progressive, the kind of politician who gets university crowds cheering and panel moderators hanging on every word.
That was the best Republican foot forward. A disgraced governor he only won by 13.
Yeah.
And you just walk, there's 8 million people between here and Times Square.
Who didn't vote.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, this wasn't a referendum on New York. This is no one gives it in New York. They don't care who the mayor is. They had a mayor who was law and order. Now we got to get...
He champions affordable housing, economic redistribution, and sweeping structural change. The complete progressive toolkit. And for a stretch, that approach works flawlessly. The crowd erupts. The trending topics ignite. The entire atmosphere feels charged until the atmosphere shifts entirely.
If the party feels differently about that, as Jessica says, then they really, really gotta talk louder about it, because that's the problem. You guys didn't speak up. You know, you grew this monster because you were too scared to discipline it as it expanded into every facet of our lives. Imagine if you had nipped wokeism in the bud rather than waiting for us to slay it with Trump. The Democratic Party are like parents of a criminal teen who raised him without any discipline or common sense, and then you released him into the wild.
Then in walks Tyrus, built like a security professional who studies constitutional law for leisure. And right next to him, Greg, who approaches political discussion the way a cat stalks a moving light, locked in, amused, and quietly unpredictable. This was never going to be a measured exchange of position papers. This was always going to be appointment television.
Mamdani bent the knee. He punked the out of it. First of all, when you two men meet, you sit down if you're equals. You stand next to me with your hands crossed.
Yeah.
I'll tell you when to talk. And what, you ain't never punked nobody before? Oh, it's beautiful. I've made him stand right there. Don't move. When that lady comes in, you're going to say you did everything, and you're sorry, and you're going to be better, right?
5,555. It opened the way these confrontations typically do with self-assurance. Mamdani settled into his well-practiced rhythm, measured voice, deliberate phrasing, that composed delivery that signals he is prepared thoroughly. He laid out the familiar argument. The institutions are failing. The wealthy escape accountability. Government must intervene boldly and immediately. It's a message that lands cleanly in rooms where doubt stays silent rather than vocal. But Greg does not stay silent. He grins. What makes Greg effective isn't simply his disagreement. It's his ability to reframe the entire conversation. He doesn't engage point by point. He redraws the whole map. Suddenly, Mamdani's sweeping economic blueprint stopped sounding like a heroic intervention. It started sounding like a group assignment where nobody contributes but everyone expects top marks. And that shift, that's the moment the atmosphere in the room transformed entirely. Tyrus didn't attack the philosophy. He went after the practical reality of it. And that's precisely where things turned uncomfortable. Tyrus has a gift for taking enormous, layered ideas and distilling them into plain kitchen table language. No academic jargon, no movement buzzwords, just unfiltered translation. And unfiltered translation can be merciless. Mamdani attempted to redirect toward morality, fairness, and equity, the reliable higher ground. But here's the problem. Once you claim the moral high ground, you're required to defend every single detail of how it actually functions. Gutfeld spotted that opening immediately. He didn't question the motive. He questioned the outcome. Because in politics, motive is poetry.
He's not even Ugandan, you know? By definition, you have to have parents or grandparents who are Ugandan. He was born in Uganda. Both of his parents are Indian, might be the reason why they left. But what's interesting is he didn't say he was Indian because he knew they have the highest median household income in the United States, and he knew that wouldn't help him in the oppression Olympics. He was smart enough to see what could get him preferential treatment, so he adorned himself with a different race, which exposes the lie of identity politics. If it is so unfair to be black in America, why are you pretending?
The result is arithmetic, and arithmetic has no interest in good intentions. You could sense the shift in the room, that quiet transition from nodding heads to people leaning back in their seats. The instant when a speech stops sounding visionary and begins sounding like an exam. Mamdani tried to regain momentum. He leaned back into systemic inequality, corporate greed, and bold transformation. But every time he began building traction, Greg slipped in a thin thread of sarcasm that deflated it entirely. Not theatrical, not hostile, just surgical. And Tyrus did something even harder to counter. He made it personal. He reframed those broad, sweeping proposals not as inspiring ideas, but as potential burdens on the very working-class families that progressive politics claims to champion. That's the angle nobody trains for. When your opponent argues that your compassion might actually damage the very people you're fighting for, you don't just lose ground, you hesitate. And on live television, even the briefest hesitation feels like an eternity. Mamdani is no stranger to debate. He has navigated tough audiences before. But this was not a campus panel or a sympathetic podcast. This was prime time. Two experienced performers who know exactly how to transform serious policy into unmissable television. Greg painted Mamdani's economic vision as well-intentioned disorder, like reorganizing furniture on a sinking vessel while insisting the problem is purely a matter of perspective. It was sharp, somewhat exaggerated, and landed exactly where it was aimed.
Yeah.
Now they're going to have a mayor in who says high-quality childcare.
And no police.
Yeah, there's another word for that. It's called trafficking.
Yeah,
so no one is going to leave their child with an underpaid, angry person. Like, you could just leave them with your wife. But I'm just saying, what? The wives are underappreciated, right, husbands? Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, when you look at that.
And there's a reason Greg has constructed an entire platform around this approach. The punchline becomes the story. And when serious policy transforms into a joke, the speaker must defend not only the substance, but the optics. Mamdani attempted to reclaim the narrative. He leaned on data and long-term projections. He made the case that genuine transformation is inherently uncomfortable and that discomfort signals progress. But Tyrus returned with something far more elemental: trust. Do voters trust that massive promises won't spiral beyond control? Do small business owners trust that new regulations won't suffocate them? Do middle-income households trust that rising taxes won't quietly creep into their personal finances month after month? These are not theoretical questions. They are gut-level questions. And when posed directly, they leave a mark. Mamdani's message runs on urgency. The system must be overhauled. The current state cannot persist. Decisive action is required immediately. But Greg redirected that urgency into something altogether different. He suggested it sounded less like courage and more like recklessness, like demolishing a building before you're entirely certain the replacement can hold weight. And nobody wants to live inside an improvisation.
It's one of the elderly tenants who comes in and just
The kids are making all this noise. She's at her wit's end. But this is what an addiction to one idea gets you. I mean, she looked irrational. There was no function in her brain. She's a remnant of the past. This is where Trump derangement addiction brings you, to that spot where you're this mental unwellness.
In spaces where impassioned speeches earn standing ovations and redistributive economics sounds like justice on demand, that message travels effortlessly. But on that stage with that audience, the applause was not guaranteed. And that's where the real impact landed, not through a single knockout blow, but through steady accumulation. A sharp quip here, a pointed question there, a skeptical expression at precisely the right moment. Greg is a craftsman at converting confidence into caricature, quietly suggesting that idealism without boundaries slides quickly into delusion. Once that impression takes root, every subsequent answer begins to feel slightly defensive. Mamdani attempted to recapture control by invoking history. Major reforms have always faced opposition. Progress is frequently ridiculed before it's recognized. The classic arc of the misunderstood visionary. But Greg undermined that framing through satire, implying that not every ambitious proposal is a civil rights milestone awaiting its applause. Sometimes it's simply a well-meaning miscalculation. That tension between intention and outcome became the invisible battlefield. The pattern was unmistakable. Mamdani argued for transformation. Greg and Tyrus argued for restraint.
Trump's laughing and smiling because he's got him.
Yeah.
Mamdani didn't come in there. He sold, we call it wolf tickets. He sold all these, he's a this, he's a that. And when I get there, I'm going to tell him this. He went in the office, he's like, don't sit down. And what was it you said last February? Oh, sir, I was hoping that you could help me with my buses. And sure, let's go do a press conference. Like, that was ultimate Trump. That's how you are not such a non-threat that you can stand next to me like you're in the altar and the choir boy while I'm holding business at the big man desk. And Mamdani was like, yep, yes.
For perhaps the first occasion in some time, Mamdani found himself slightly outside familiar ground. Not shaken, not defeated, simply navigating terrain that was not designed for him. Greg's humor kept the tempo unpredictable while Tyrus's directness kept it grounded. Together, they established a rhythm that made lengthy explanations feel burdensome and quick jabs feel crisp and decisive. That is the physics of television. Extended answers feel like retreats. Brief punches land hard. For Mamdani, it served as an unmistakable reminder. Messaging does not exist in isolation. Ideas celebrated in one environment can be dismantled in another. For the audience, it was pure theater. A collision of approaches, idealism versus irreverence, policy versus punchline. Politics has always had its arenas of combat. Sometimes they are Senate chambers, sometimes debate platforms, and sometimes they are brightly lit studios where sarcasm moves faster than statistics. Mamdani arrived prepared to argue policy. Greg and Tyrus arrived prepared to challenge the very premise. In the end, no one's worldview transformed overnight, but the dynamic did. The ascending progressive voice found himself absorbing crossfire rather than soaking in applause. Whether you interpret that as an unfair ambush or long overdue scrutiny likely depends entirely on where you stood before the cameras rolled.
Seen what his argument is for that? He says it's because the box where you put the money, it makes the homeless people who come in feel very bad, that they have to pay. So just remove the conflict that leads to violence against the bus driver. Just get rid of the bus fare, the toll box, and then all the stuff. That is the reasoning of a child. Well, how do you pay for how do you pay the income of whatever called the check? How do you pay the bus driver?
That is the brilliance of
where does the money
exchanges
go?
like this
How do
one.
you do this?
They don't merely challenge positions, they test adaptability. In today's political landscape, carrying a vision is not sufficient. You must also survive the moment that vision becomes the punchline. On that night, beneath those studio lights, Mamdani absorbed a critical lesson. Conviction carries enormous weight, but sarcasm delivered with precision can be absolutely volcanic. And the real aftershock didn't detonate on set. It detonated online as the sharpest clips began circulating, Not the complete policy discussions, not the careful context, just the most biting, most memorable moments. To understand why it hits so hard, you have to grasp the contrast in identities. Mamdani represents the emerging wave of progressive politics, ambitious proposals, unapologetic language, and systemic overhaul. He aligns ideologically with figures like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It is insurgent energy packaged as moral conviction. Greg, by contrast, does not treat insurgency as heroic. He treats it as raw material. The formula is straightforward. Take serious political ambition, run it through the satire machine, and observe what remains intact afterward.
4 guys in this audience who could have been better candidates and would have gave him a tougher fight. But no one bothered. So I'm
That
sitting
wasn't
there
a
looking.
compliment.
Yeah.
No, there was actually 4 very bright guys here. Thanks for helping me get in the building. The door was pushed and they pulled. But it just goes back to the point. When you don't put anything forward, this is what you get.
Yeah.
If he would have had anyone to challenge him with any merit, any integrity, any...
11,111. Some ideas emerge unchanged. Others shrink considerably and lose their shine entirely. That night, Mamdani's platform went through that machine. What made the exchange so compelling was not who prevailed in the conventional sense, it was how the leverage shifted in real time. Mamdani is typically the disruptor. That night, he was the one being disrupted. And disruption feels entirely different when you are absorbing it rather than delivering it. Tyrus kept returning to one particularly devastating theme: unintended consequences. It is a lethal angle because it converts optimism into naivety. Rent controls aggressive, developers retreat. Heavier corporate taxation, collateral damage follows. Mamdani pushed back. Structural failures demand structural remedies. Incremental progress has proven insufficient. Inequality demands bold intervention. It is a morally compelling argument, but the counterattack was never about whether inequality exists. It was about whether his proposed remedies could generate serious unintended damage. That is precisely where Greg's approach becomes dangerous. He does not overwhelm you with numbers. He reframes your solution as reckless overcorrection, like addressing a dripping pipe with a demolition crew. Once that image anchors itself, you're no longer having a policy debate. You are defending your sense of proportion.
I've yet to see anybody who's in the throes of Trump derangement ever improve or get better or be successful. Once they're in it, they can't get out. They need to get complete deprogramming, go to some spa in the middle of nowhere, do some trauma therapy. And you're right, Trump is the only thing the party has because they cannot articulate ideas that are counter to his because his are common sense. They're like, so the Democrats are like a yo-yo champ.
The segment expanded into something far larger than Mamdani himself. It became a symbolic contest over the direction of progressive politics in America. The Sanders-style economic revolution against careful incrementalism, activist-driven urban energy against national audiences wary of sweeping transformation. And Mamdani was carrying that entire philosophical burden in a studio engineered for punchlines. What genuinely stunned viewers wasn't that Mamdani defended his ideas. It was that he couldn't fully govern the framing. In supportive environments, progressive language feels expansive and limitless. On that set, it felt compressed and confined. Every sweeping declaration met a narrowing question. Every visionary plan was pulled back down to logistics. That compression demands precision, and precision under live pressure is punishing. Still, Mamdani did not collapse. He held his position. He challenged the assumption that caution automatically equals wisdom, even turning the argument around at one point to contend that fear of change has historically shielded deeply inequitable systems. It was a smart pivot, but Greg flourishes on emotional deflation. When rhetoric builds toward a crescendo, he punctures it, not with fury, but almost playfully. Passion encounters parody. And in short-form media, parody almost always claims
MSNBC
victory.
and be like, when I saw the president, I told him this, and I was like this. Like, no, you sat there with your hands crossed and kept, look, is it okay to talk? Is it okay to talk? So this was a great day for President Trump because this dude is what he is not leadership. He says whoever tells him he's the toughest guy in the room when he's surrounded by his people. He went there to Trump. He's going to change things. He's going to do this. He should have been in there like not shaking his hand, talking. We're gonna take you down. I am your greatest.
Tyrus contributed a different variety of weight, less theatrical, more anchored. He framed the conversation not as ideological warfare, but as lived experience, speaking about working families and small business owners confronting genuine economic pressures. That framing felt tangible and real. It redirected the conversation from theory to consequence, and consequences are significantly harder to romanticize. By the closing minutes, the energy had transitioned from offense to defense. Critics contended that Mamdani struggled when pushed beyond talking points into granular examination. But the undeniable reality, he was stress-tested outside his comfort zone, and that is precisely what made it riveting. Political figures routinely operate inside echo chambers where applause becomes a form of insulation. That insulation dissolves under a cross-ideological spotlight. Mamdani stepped willingly into that spotlight, and that reflects genuine confidence. But confidence is not a shield. Progressive messaging frequently leads with moral urgency and emotional resonance. But when confronted by skeptical pragmatism, emotion must be reinforced by airtight execution. Otherwise, opponents will frame boldness as recklessness, without exception.
So back in 2009, Zohran Mamdani, or whatever, the Socialist Democrat nominee for New York City's mayor, identified as Black or African American when he applied to Columbia University. I guess there was no box for trust fund communist douchebag. But it didn't work. He didn't get in. He probably shouldn't have included a referral letter from this lady. But now, Zohran says he doesn't consider himself.
Greg understands the psychology of television. Audiences respond to rhythm, humor, and self-assurance. Tyrus understands relatability. He converts abstract debates into everyday consequences. Together, they didn't simply challenge Mamdani's policies. They challenged his delivery. And delivery shapes perception. For Mamdani, this moment could ultimately sharpen him. Political development emerges from friction. The exchange demonstrated that he is willing to step beyond protected territory. That willingness, paired with more precise responses in future encounters, could broaden his credibility, because there will absolutely be a next time. Figures aligned with Sanders-style economics are not fading away. They are organizing, running campaigns, and building influence across urban politics. But the notion of effortless dominance absorbed a real blow. Mamdani discovered that conviction must travel alongside adaptability. Greg and Tyrus demonstrated that skepticism delivered with composure and humor can redirect even the most self-assured narrative. Politics today is not simply about policy documents. It is about framing. Whether you view this as a public dismantling or a trial by fire depends entirely on where you are positioned. But one truth remains undeniable. In today's media arena, ideas do not simply compete. They collide. And sometimes that collision tells a far greater story than the policies themselves ever could.